In the busy city of Boston, 67-year-old millionaire Victor Langford made a shocking decision. He was the owner of a successful international trading company worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Tired of his family's greedy behavior and fake love, Victor decided to test them in the harshest way possible. He told his wife and 3 adult children that he had lost everything in a terrible business deal and was now completely broke. The very next morning, he left his luxurious mansion with only old clothes and a small bag. He shaved his head and grew a rough beard to change his look completely. Victor began living as a homeless man on the streets of Boston. If you are enjoying this powerful story, please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you never miss new emotional stories like this. For the first few days, Victor stayed near a quiet park in downtown Boston. He watched from a distance as his family reacted to the news. His wife, Eleanor, immediately called lawyers and started checking bank accounts. His eldest son, Alexander, began contacting buyers to sell company properties. His daughter, Sophia, went on a sudden shopping trip as if celebrating. Only his youngest son, Marcus, seemed quiet and unsure. Victor, now dressed in dirty clothes with a worn coat, felt both sad and determined. He wanted to know who truly cared for him and who only loved his money. The streets were cold at night, and the reality of living without comfort hit him hard. Yet he continued his plan, sleeping on benches and eating whatever little he could find. Deep down, Victor hoped at least one person from his family would show real concern. But as days passed, he started seeing a side of his family that shocked him. The man who once controlled a business empire was now pretending to be homeless. And what his own blood would do next would change everything forever. Victor Langford, now looking completely different with his shaved head and rough grey beard, walked slowly toward his old neighborhood. His expensive clothes had been replaced by worn-out jeans, a torn jacket and dirty shoes. For the first time, he decided to approach his own family as a stranger. He waited near the large iron gates of his former mansion. His wife Eleanor stepped out of her luxury car carrying shopping bags. Victor moved closer with slow steps and spoke in a tired voice. "Ma'am, I'm hungry and have nowhere to go. Can you help me with some food or a little money?" Eleanor looked at him with disgust. She did not recognize her own husband. "Get away from my house," she said sharply. "We don't give money to beggars here." She quickly called security and ordered them to remove him from the property. Victor stood there in shock as 2 guards pushed him roughly down the street. Later that afternoon, he saw his eldest son Alexander leaving the mansion in a hurry. Victor approached him near the car. "Sir, please. I used to have a family too. Can you spare anything?" Alexander barely looked at him. He pulled out a $5 bill, threw it on the ground and said, "Take this and don't come back. We have enough problems already." Victor felt a deep pain in his chest. He picked up the money silently and watched his son drive away. In the evening, his daughter Sophia came out with friends. When Victor asked her for help, she laughed uncomfortably and said, "Sorry, I don't carry cash," before walking away quickly. Only his youngest son, Marcus, seemed different. When Victor approached him outside a coffee shop, Marcus stopped for a moment. He looked at the old man with unsure eyes and gave him $20. "I'm sorry things are hard for you," Marcus said quietly before leaving. That night, Victor sat alone on a cold park bench, holding the money in his hands. The temperature was dropping fast. He had expected some coldness, but the reality was much harsher than he imagined. His own family had failed the first test completely. As the wind grew stronger, Victor began to wonder how far his family would go to protect their new wealth, and whether any of them still cared about him at all. The next few days were extremely difficult for Victor Langford. The cold Boston nights made his body weak. He slept on park benches covered with old newspapers and woke up with pain in his bones. His once powerful body now felt tired and heavy. Still, he continued watching his family from a distance. One evening, Victor used a payphone near the park to call his home. His wife Eleanor answered. In a weak voice, he said, "Eleanor, it's me, Victor. I need help. I'm really sick." There was a long silence. Then Eleanor laughed coldly and replied, "Nice try. My husband is gone. Don't call this number again," and hung up. Victor stood in shock, holding the phone. The pain in his chest grew stronger. He realized his own wife did not even recognize his voice. Later that night, fever took over his body. He started coughing badly and could barely walk. Still, he forced himself to go near his old company office building. Hiding behind a car, Victor saw his eldest son Alexander inside with lawyers. Through the large glass windows, he watched them laughing and signing papers. He overheard Alexander say, "Father is finished. We should sell the main warehouse and the factory immediately. Split everything before he tries to come back." Victor felt his heart breaking. The company he had built over 40 years was being torn apart by his own children. His daughter Sophia was already planning a luxury vacation with her friends using his credit cards. The greed was worse than he had ever imagined. That same freezing night, Victor's condition became serious. He collapsed on the sidewalk near the park. A few passers-by looked at him but kept walking. No one stopped. As he lay there struggling to breathe, Victor wondered if this test was worth his life. The man who once had everything now had nothing, and his own family was celebrating his disappearance. Just when he thought no one would help, a young woman in her late 20s stopped beside him. She worked as a manager in one of his smaller offices. She had no idea who the sick homeless man really was, but she still knelt down and tried to help him. The young woman named Claire knelt beside Victor and gently touched his forehead. "Sir, you're burning with fever," she said with worry. She quickly called a taxi and took him to a nearby homeless shelter. Instead of a hospital, knowing he had no insurance or identification. At the shelter, the staff gave him medicine, warm soup, and a clean bed. Victor was too weak to speak much, but he quietly thanked Claire. The next morning, Victor felt slightly better. From the shelter, he used an old friend's phone to check on his company's activities. What he learned shocked him deeply. His wife Eleanor and eldest son, Alexander, had already hired lawyers to declare him mentally unstable. They were planning to take full legal control of his entire empire. Victor also discovered that Alexander had secretly started selling valuable company properties at low prices to his own friends. Sophia was busy transferring money into her personal accounts. The greed was spreading fast. Only his youngest son Marcus had not joined their meetings. That afternoon, Claire came back to the shelter to check on Victor. She brought him warm clothes and some food. "I work at Langford Trading," she told him. "The company is in chaos since the owner disappeared. Many workers are scared they will lose their jobs." Victor listened carefully but said nothing about his true identity. He felt both grateful and heartbroken. A simple employee showed him more kindness than his own family. Later that night, Victor borrowed a small recording device from a shelter volunteer. He decided it was time to gather proof. He slowly made his way back toward his old mansion under the cover of darkness. Hiding near the garden, he recorded a conversation between Eleanor and Alexander through an open window. "I don't care where he is," Eleanor said coldly. "If he comes back, we'll say he's crazy. We need to finish this quickly and sell everything." Victor stood in the shadows, his heart heavy with pain. The fever was still burning inside him, but the betrayal hurt much more. He now understood how dangerous his own family had become. As he walked back to the shelter in the cold night, Victor knew he had to make a final decision soon. His test had gone too far, and the people he once loved were ready to destroy him completely. Victor returned to the shelter exhausted and still fighting his fever. The recordings he made that night played again and again in his mind. He could not believe the cold words coming from his own wife and son. The next day he felt strong enough to move around and decided to gather more evidence. He slowly made his way to one of his smaller company offices. Wearing old clothes and a cap, no one recognized him. From outside he saw Alexander and Eleanor meeting with company accountants. Using his hidden recording device, Victor captured every word. They were planning to declare him dead if he did not return within a month, so they could claim the full inheritance. They had even contacted a doctor willing to write false medical reports about his mental health. Victor's heart sank deeper with every sentence he recorded. Sophia was also involved. She had already bought a new luxury car using company funds. The only person who seemed troubled was his youngest son, Marcus. Victor saw Marcus arguing with Alexander in the parking lot. "You can't do this," Marcus said. What if Dad is really in trouble? We should be looking for him, not selling everything. Alexander laughed and pushed him aside. Grow up, he's gone. This is our time now. That evening, Victor's condition became worse again. He returned to the shelter, weak and coughing. Claire visited him once more. She sat beside his bed and said, "The company is falling apart. Hundreds of workers are scared. I don't know what to do." Victor looked at her kind face and felt a small ray of hope. Here was a stranger showing more care than his own blood. But the pain of betrayal was growing stronger. He now had clear recordings of his family's cruel plans. As night fell over the shelter, Victor made a firm decision in his heart. He would not stop until he revealed the full truth. Outside, the cold Boston wind howled. Victor lay in his small bed, knowing that his family was getting more dangerous with every passing day. The test he had started was now becoming a fight for everything he had built in his life. Victor spent another restless night at the shelter. His fever had returned stronger, and his body ached with every movement. Still, he refused to give up. The next evening, he learned from Claire that his family was throwing a big celebration party at the mansion. They were calling it a fresh start party. Despite his weak condition, Victor wrapped himself in his old coat and slowly walked toward his former home. The cold wind cut through his clothes as he stood, hidden behind the tall bushes near the garden. Bright lights and loud music came from inside the mansion. Through the large windows he could clearly see everything. His wife Eleanor was laughing with a glass of champagne in her hand. Alexander stood proudly in the center, telling guests how he was now running the company. Sophia was showing off her new expensive jewelry. They looked happy, as if Victor had never existed. He watched his own family celebrate his disappearance while he stood outside, freezing in the cold. Victor's eyes filled with tears of anger and sadness. He took out his small recording device and captured every word. Alexander raised his glass and said loudly, "To our new life without complications. The old man is gone for good. Now we can sell everything and live freely." The guests clapped and cheered. At that moment, Victor felt something break inside him. The pain was deeper than the cold or his sickness. These were the people he had loved and worked hard for his entire life. Now they were rejoicing at his downfall. Suddenly, Victor started coughing violently. He tried to stay quiet, but the coughing became too strong. He collapsed against the bushes. Claire, who had come to the party as a company employee, heard the noise and came outside to check. She found Victor lying on the ground, struggling to breathe. "Sir, it's you again," she said in shock. She quickly helped him up and supported his weak body. "You need real medical help. Why do you keep coming here?" Victor looked at her but could not speak. As Claire helped him walk away from the mansion, he glanced back one last time at the bright party. His own family was still laughing inside, completely unaware that the man they had abandoned was watching them from the darkness. Claire helped Victor slowly walk back toward the shelter. His body was burning with fever, and every step felt painful. The sounds of laughter and music from the mansion still echoed in his ears. He kept coughing as Claire supported him with her shoulder. "You should go to a hospital," Claire said worriedly. "This is not normal. Why were you standing outside that big house?" Victor remained silent. He was too weak and too heartbroken to speak. When they reached the shelter, Claire made sure he was given medicine and warm blankets. She stayed with him for some time before leaving. "Please take care of yourself," she said gently before going home. The next morning, Victor felt a little stronger. He used the shelter's old computer to check his company's official records. What he saw made his blood boil. Alexander and Eleanor had already filed papers to declare him legally dead. They had also scheduled a big meeting with buyers to sell the main factory. The same factory where hundreds of families depended on jobs. Victor's hands shook as he read the documents. His own family was moving faster than he expected. Later that day, he hid near the company office again. He watched his youngest son Marcus arguing heatedly with Alexander in the parking lot. "I still think we should wait," Marcus shouted. "What if Dad is alive and needs help? This feels wrong." Alexander grabbed Marcus by the collar. "Shut up and stay out of this. If you try to stop us, I'll make sure you get nothing." Victor recorded the entire argument. The betrayal felt even deeper now. That night, as he lay in the shelter bed, his mind was racing. He knew he could not wait any longer. His family was destroying everything he had built, and they were willing to erase him completely. Outside, heavy rain started falling over Boston. Victor stared at the ceiling, his body still weak but his resolve growing stronger. He now had enough recordings to expose all of them. The test he had started as a game had turned into a dangerous fight, and he was ready to end it. The rain continued falling heavily over Boston as Victor lay awake in the shelter. His body was still weak, but a new fire burned inside him. He could no longer stay silent. The next morning, he learned from Claire that his family had called an emergency meeting at the mansion. They were going to sign the final papers to sell the company and declare him legally dead. Victor knew this was the moment. He borrowed a clean but simple shirt from the shelter and combed his rough beard. He still looked like a homeless man, but his eyes were sharp and determined. Claire noticed the change in him. "Where are you going?" she asked with concern. "You're not well enough yet." Victor looked at her for a long moment. "I have to face something I should have faced long ago," he replied quietly. He did not tell her the full truth yet. That afternoon, Victor stood outside the mansion gates once again. Inside, his family and several lawyers were gathered around the large dining table. Papers and documents were spread everywhere. Alexander looked proud and confident as he passed pens to everyone. Eleanor smiled while signing her name. Sophia was already talking about how she would spend her share of the money. Only Marcus sat quietly, looking uncomfortable. Victor took a deep breath and walked through the open gate. His old security guard did not recognize him and tried to stop him, but Victor pushed forward and entered the house. When he stepped into the dining room, everyone turned and stared at the strange, homeless man who had suddenly appeared. "What the hell are you doing here?" Alexander shouted angrily. "Get this beggar out of my house!" Victor stood tall despite his weak body. His voice was calm but powerful when he spoke. "Your house? This is still my house." The room fell completely silent. Eleanor's face turned pale. Sophia dropped her phone. Marcus stood up slowly, his eyes widening with shock. Victor looked at each of them one by one, letting the heavy silence fill the room. The moment he had waited for had finally arrived, and the truth was about to destroy everything they had planned. The room stayed deathly silent. Eleanor's face went completely white. Alexander dropped the pen in his hand. Sophia stared with her mouth open. Only Marcus looked at the homeless man with growing recognition. Victor slowly removed his old cap and stood straighter. "What's wrong? Don't you recognize your own father and husband?" Eleanor stepped back, shaking her head. "No, that's impossible. Victor is gone." "You're lying." Victor gave a tired, bitter smile. "I didn't lose my money. I never lost anything. I wanted to see how my own family would treat me when they thought I had nothing. And you all showed me exactly who you are." Alexander's face turned red with anger. "This is crazy. Security! Get this man out of here right now!" But the security guards who entered the room froze when Victor looked at them. One of them whispered, "Oh my God, it really is Mr. Langford." Victor took out his phone and played the secret recordings. The entire room could clearly hear Eleanor's voice saying, "If he comes back, we'll say he's crazy." Then Alexander's voice came, "The old man is gone for good. We can sell everything." The color drained from everyone's faces. Sophia started crying. Eleanor sat down heavily in a chair, looking terrified. Alexander tried to speak, but no words came out. Marcus stood there in complete shock, tears forming in his eyes. Victor's voice grew stronger as he continued, "I heard every word. I watched you celebrate my disappearance. I saw you trying to sell the company I built with 40 years of hard work. You were ready to declare me dead while I was sleeping on park benches in the cold." The tension in the room was suffocating. Victor looked at each of them with deep disappointment and pain. "I came here today to end this test, but I never expected my own family could be so heartless." Alexander suddenly stepped forward, his voice desperate. "Dad, please. We can explain everything. It was a misunderstanding." Victor raised his hand to stop him. The atmosphere was heavy with fear and guilt. Everyone waited to see what the man who had lost everything and gained the painful truth would do next. Victor looked at his family with cold, disappointed eyes. The silence in the room was heavy. Alexander stepped forward, his hands shaking. "Dad, please listen. We were worried. We thought you really lost everything. We were just trying to protect the company." Victor raised his hand and stopped him. Protect? You were celebrating. I stood outside in the freezing rain and watched. You laugh while I slept on a park bench. I heard every word you said about declaring me dead. He turned to Eleanor. You, my wife of 38 years, told security to throw me out like a dog. Then he looked at Sophia. And you couldn't even give me $10. His voice was full of pain. The only person who showed any humanity was a young employee who didn't even know who I was. Victor took a deep breath and continued. I have made my decision. Effective immediately, I am removing all of you from my will. Alexander and Sophia will receive nothing. Eleanor, you will leave this house within 30 days. I am giving full control of the company to my youngest son, Marcus. Marcus looked completely shocked. Dad, I don't know what to say. You were the only one who showed doubt, Victor said. You argued with your brother. That small hesitation saved you. Alexander's face turned red with rage. You can't do this. We'll fight you in court. Victor smiled bitterly. Go ahead. I have hours of recordings, bank statements, and witnesses. The same lawyers you hired will now work against you. Eleanor started crying dramatically and begged for forgiveness. But Victor turned away. At that moment, Claire entered the room after being called by Victor. Everyone stared at her in surprise. Victor placed a hand on Claire's shoulder. This young woman helped me when I was dying on the street. She will become the new vice president of operations. She showed more kindness in one night than all of you showed in weeks. The tension in the room was unbearable. Alexander looked ready to explode while Eleanor sat broken in her chair. Victor stood tall despite his weak body, finally in control of his life again. The family that betrayed him was now facing the consequences of their own greed. Victor stood strong in the middle of the dining room, looking at the shocked faces of his family. The silence was broken only by Eleanor's quiet crying. Alexander looked furious but helpless. Sophia kept staring at the floor, unable to meet her father's eyes. I have one more thing to say, Victor continued in a calm but firm voice. For the past 40 years, I built this company with honesty and hard work. I thought I was building it for all of you. But the moment you believed I had nothing, you showed your true faces. Greed turned you into strangers. He turned to his youngest son. Marcus, you will take over as chairman and CEO starting tomorrow. I will guide you for the first year, but the final decisions will be yours. Claire will work directly with you as vice president. Marcus had tears in his eyes. Dad, I don't deserve this. I should have done more to find you. You did enough by not joining their plans, Victor replied softly. That was more than the others. Alexander suddenly stepped forward, his voice shaking with anger and fear. This is not fair. We are your blood. You can't just throw us away. Victor looked at him with deep sadness. Blood means nothing when the heart is empty. I gave you everything, and you left me to die on the street. Now you will learn to live without my money. He then looked at Claire, who stood quietly in the corner, still in shock. And you? You helped a stranger when no one else would. That kindness changed everything. 6 months later, the sun shone brightly over Boston. Victor sat on the same park bench where he had once slept as a homeless man. He was clean-shaven, well-dressed and healthy again. Marcus sat beside him. Claire walked up with 3 cups of coffee and smiled warmly as she joined them. The company was doing better than ever. Victor had donated a large portion of his wealth to build shelters and hospitals for the homeless. Hundreds of workers kept their jobs, and the factory remained open. Eleanor had moved out of the mansion. Alexander and Sophia tried to fight the decision in court, but failed. They now lived far away, learning to survive on their own for the first time. Victor took a deep breath and looked around the park. I came here to test my family, he said quietly. But I ended up finding my real family. Marcus smiled. We're proud of you, Dad. Victor placed one hand on Marcus's shoulder and the other on Claire's. For the first time in many years, he felt true peace. The man who had pretended to be homeless discovered the painful truth about greed, but he also found genuine kindness and loyalty. As the sun began to set over the city, Victor smiled softly. His dangerous test had cost him his old family, but it had given him something far more valuable, a second chance at life with people who truly cared. And that was worth more than all the millions he had ever earned. What would you do if your own family betrayed you the moment they thought you had nothing? If this powerful story touched you, please like, subscribe and hit the bell icon to never miss new stories. Thank you.